I'm sure people have seen on Twitter, on social media of any kind of form, that the Christian Horner situation is finally resolved following a lengthy Red Bull specific probe into the allegations made against him by a female employee. Red Bull has said that it has found no evidence of inappropriate behavior. Laz, I'll start with you. What was it like as this kind of unfolded on the ground in Bahrain today?
Well, it was a big waiting game. So we got wind that there was likely to be an announcement today, but we had heard, over the last couple of weeks that perhaps it will be concluded before testing, perhaps it will be concluded before the launch. We even thought at one stage, but Red Bull stuck to it that they were going to make sure that they investigated this in a fair, rigorous way. It was an independent barrister, independent lawyer who was looking into it, and ultimately providing a report to the Red Bull board to make a decision. And so it was really a question of when would that decision come out. And there were people who were kind of tracking Christian Horner's movements towards Bahrain, and when he was on the flight, and what that meant. Did that mean that because he's coming now, he's going to be in a position where the investigation dismisses the allegations against him? And it was kind of running quite late. We'd had all the media sessions that we have on a normal media day at the Formula One circuit. So all the drivers had spoken, and it had been a conversation, or had been a subject topic in a number of in the press briefings, and also within the paddock. It had been very much a conversation amongst people talking about what they knew when they thought we might hear something official. And then eventually, about 6:30, we got the press release through from Red Bull, which was very straightforward. I can read it out if it helps. Yeah. It was, quote, the independent investigation into the allegations made against Mr. Horner is complete, and Red Bull can confirm that the grievance has been dismissed. The complainant has a right of appeal. Continuing the quote, Red Bull is confident that the investigation has been fair, rigorous, and impartial. The investigation report is confidential and contains the private information of the parties and third parties who assisted in the investigation, and therefore will not be commenting further out of respect for all concerned. Continuing the quote, Red Bull will continue striving to meet the highest workplace standards. So while we got the key bit of information we were looking at, which is whether this investigation found Christian Horner, I think these allegations against Christian Horner to be worthy of disciplinary action or something like that, or not. In fact, they were dismissed. We got very little further information on the details of it, and of course, there's been a huge amount of speculation in various different media outlets over the last few weeks, and I think that does leave a few questions still about what happens next.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that this was a Red Bull appointed investigation, certainly investigating one of their own employees, as most institutions or organizations would do. This wasn't an FIA investigation. This wasn't a Formula One investigation. I'm just curious from your standpoint, Nate, what unanswered questions regarding this are still left out there?
Yeah, I think it's quite a lot. And I think they speak to that statement that Laurence just read out, and the fact that it is pretty vague, in terms of it's just got the headline news in there. And we kind of expected that was going to be the case. There's a lot of confidentiality, at play here. And I think that ultimately, I think for a lot of people, isn't going to be a satisfactory statement. When something's gone on as long as it has, and when there's been some of the reports that that Laurence alluded to, I just don't think that Formula One is going to be able to kind of move on from this quickly. I think we've got a few of the team bosses talking tomorrow as we record this, which would be Thursday. Notably not Christian Horner, but I expect we'll talk to Horner at some point during the week. And I think that will be probably one of the buzzwords, is transparency, and how much do we know about what's happened here? How much do we know about the investigation? And if you're Formula One, and if you're the FIA, especially as the FIA, you've probably got a duty of care to the sport. You've probably got a duty of trying to find out what has actually happened there. From Formula One's point of view, I don't think this has been a really great look for Formula One, just the length this has taken, some of the ways that this is dragged out in the public eye. So I think a lot of this stuff is going to really have an impact, longer term. I think that there's going to be a lot of questions asked. I think a lot of people are going to want to see, a lot of really concrete stuff come out of this. And as Laurence mentioned, there is this process for an appeal here as well. So by no means is this, a line drawn underneath the matter for now. And yeah, I think that really, there are questions that need to be answered by both Red Bull kind of by, I suppose Red Bull senior company, Red Bull Racing, really have been kind of following them for the time being. But I think as well, Formula One, their reaction to this is going to be scrutinized quite heavily because, Formula One's talked a lot about, improving the sport and improving, certain things in terms of, the makeup of the sport, in terms of diversity and stuff like that. And regardless of what this complaint was about, it was, a female employee about a male boss, which we've seen time and time again in the world. So that addressing that properly, I think, is going to be the right thing. It's a tricky one from our point of view because, as Laurence mentioned as well, this was an independent investigation, so I think that it's always difficult to sort of say, oh, has this just been, has this just been a one-way show? Has Horner just kind of ended up in power again because Red Bulls are looking to protect him? There were real fears within Red Bull, within Red Bull Racing, I think within kind of Horner's mind last week that this was going to go a different way. And, the mood around that kind of changed this week. I think, I'm going to say Jim or John Farley. I forget which Farley it is at Ford because the other one is the famous comedian Farley, or is his brother or his uncle? But anyway, I always name the wrong one.
Correct.
Yeah, I always name the wrong one. Is currently the CEO, and it's been a long day, so the name has slipped my mind. But he put a lot of pressure on Red Bull this weekend, to speed this process up, expedite this process up. And I think that a lot of people I saw questioning, like, well, why is that? Why is it taken forward? I think it was kind of harsh on Formula One because Formula One had released similar statements saying that. But yeah, I think there's just a lot of groups now that the pressure's kind of on them to make sure that they have an appropriate response, and I think that they don't just let this kind of disappear into the wind. There is a chance that the season starts, everyone starts talking about the racing again, no one starts talking about Christian Horner, and I think a lot of people would feel quite kind of let down by that. So I think just generally for the good of the sport, if there's any chance it can happen, kind of releasing more of these details would satisfy a lot of people. I just don't know, from what Laurence and I have been hearing. Yeah, I just don't know what Red Bull are going to be able to release. And ultimately, I just don't see how people are going to get clarity or get kind of closure over what's happened here. So obviously this is going to run and run, but yeah, I think that sadly a lot of the unanswered questions that you allude to, Casey, I don't know if they're all going to have a kind of an immediate answer to them, which, going into a season is just not a good look for Formula One, really. So I think it'll be something we come back to at some point.
You do. So you don't think that the book is closed here and that this matter is resolved and we're moving forward?
Well, I think for Red Bull, definitely that's the way they'll look at it. But I just think as a wider story, I mean, this is one of the most important people in Formula One,
Sure.
One of the most popular people, or at least one of the most notorious people, depending on who you talk to. And yeah, I just think it's the sort of story that has gained a lot of attention over the past 3 weeks, and because of the way it's been reported, and because of there's been a lot of very strong opinions on it. Both on kind of both ends of the spectrum, I think. So whenever you have a story like that, I think people want to make sure they know what they're talking about. And so from that point of view, I can see it coming up again. And yeah, we'll see. I think kind of the next couple of days will determine how much that runs on, though.